Good morning, or depending on when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and I was always told I had a voice radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCG Radio. Now, this week we are going to be talking about the top 4 decks in standard format. I think I've got it narrowed down to a top 4. Could be wrong, but that's kind of the beauty of it. I've got, at least for the time being, what are the top 4 decks in Standard. We've also going to be looking at a whole bunch of new cards, and I'm going to be telling you about an expanded tournament in which I took part this past weekend. So, quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's going to be a pretty gosh darned good show. Now, I should direct you to my YouTube channel before we get going, youtube.com/PTCG Radio, and essentially there's a whole bunch of Pokemon stuff on there, but the most recent stuff, I've uploaded all 4 rounds from a Standard League challenge in which I took part, and it was the first weekend in which Ancient Origins was legal. Now, I've uploaded 4 rounds. There were 5 rounds in that particular tournament. One round was, round 4 as it happens, was a Vespiquen mirror match where one player got disqualified very, very quickly, or not disqualified, but was given a game loss very, very quickly. Well, not very quickly, but a few turns in for not putting out their prizes. I didn't think that was worth wasting your time with. I like to think that the followers of PTCG Radio, you lovely listeners, I like to think you're intelligent people who want to watch these games to be entertained and to learn a bit about the game, and neither of that was going to happen with that particular round 4. I almost recorded it on the end of round 3, just kind of as a little extra, but to be honest, I've just gone and left it. Now, speaking of full games recorded at real tournaments to which I have put real commentary, I'm going to be honest with you, I've recorded more. I recorded 5 rounds this past weekend at an expanded league challenge in Sheffield. Now, one round I did do to highlight a local player. I was asked by the organisers to highlight one of their local players. So I have recorded 1 round between players who at the time had 1 win and 2 losses. When I upload this to my channel, I encourage you to check it out. I'm sure it will be lovely. I haven't watched the game yet, so I can't comment. But I will put a little, a disclaimer on the front of that one. So if you're only worried about watching Worlds players and all of that, you'll be fully informed beforehand. Although I should point out, I recorded a whole bunch of awesome games with Worlds players at that tournament. They are wonderful. I'm going to start recording them tomorrow, and they should start going online either Thursday or Friday. And like I say, there'll be 5 rounds going up, so it really is going to be absolutely fantastic. So, without further ado, let's go and have a look at some of these here new cards. And they're all from X and Y 8, which is going to be our November set, our break set. We've got a Dodrio. It's got an ability Retreat Aid. While this Pokemon is on your bench, your active Pokemon's retreat cost is lowered by a double colourless. Useful, but it's a stage 1 that's kind of weak. Oh, and for free colourless, you flip 3 coins, it does 40 times the number of heads. 120 for free energy isn't stellar, and that's if you could hit 3 out of 3 heads. So, it's not amazing. It's kind of useful, especially with Floatstone out of the format, although Floatstone's coming back. So, honestly, I'm not a huge fan. We have a Florges. It is a Stage 2 Pokemon. Again, this is coming in X and Y8, which is our November set. It is Fairy, and its attack for free Fairy energy does 70 damage, and Confusion, it's garbage. However, it does reduce the attacks of each of your Pokemon by 1 fairy less. Now, it does say all of your Pokemon, not all of your fairy Pokemon, but it's unlikely you'll have non-fairy Pokemon that need fairy energy. So, if there are, you're in. It's unlikely. But there's a Florges Break. Now, for those who are new to the party, Break is a new mechanic we are getting in our next set, and our next set is going to be called Breakthrough. See what I did there? And essentially it's going to be like level Xing for anyone that played back in the day. You evolve up to the relevant level, so for Florges it would be a Stage 2 Pokemon, and then you could further evolve it into Florges Break. Now, before I get into tell you what Florges Break actually does, like I'm assuming a lot of you, I have severe reservations about this game mechanic. This essentially turns it into a Stage 3 Pokemon. So even if you rare candy from Stage 1 to Stage 2, you're going to have to turn 1, lay down the Pokemon. Turn 2, rare candy, evolve. turn 3 Break Evolve. That is slow, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I'm a big fan of the Zoroark break, but I'm also a big fan of the Stage 1 Zoroark. You can get the Stage 1 Zoroark on turn 1 with Wally and then Break Evolve later, but it's a really good one that is then slightly enhanced by the break Pokemon. I ain't a fan of Florges. What about Florges break? Well, it's got an ability Flower Breeze, no extra attacks, but remember that the break Pokemon, like the level X before them, you keep the abilities, you keep the attacks, but you add to it. The ability is called Flower Breeze. Once during your turn, you may heal 30 damage from your active Pokemon and remove 1 special condition. Kind of like a neutered version of Pokemon Center Lady. And as Pokemon Center Lady has seen a fair bit of play, I think it is fair to assume that this ability might be slightly useful. But it's not enough, ladies and gentlemen. It really isn't enough. I'm not playing a stage 3 just to heal 30 damage and get rid of special conditions. It ain't worth it, quite frankly. Now, if you're playing Florges anyway, putting 1 Florges break in there just for funsies is, of course, a fantastical idea. But I don't like Florges. Sorry. We also have a Xerneas and an Evil Towel, and the Xerneas is terrible. It's pretty bad, to be honest. For a fairy and a double colourless, 10 damage plus 30 more for each type of your bench Pokemon, and it's called Rainbow Force. So, in theory, you can, 6 different types of bench Pokemon, grass, metal, etc. You are doing 190 for free energy. That can be very useful, especially on a basic. So, although I'm not a huge fan of this card, it has one very obvious application, and that is in the Aromatisse decks that at the moment we only tend to see in Expanded. Because in Expanded you've got both Rainbow and Prism Energy. And what you essentially do is you play all types. You play a Genesect to knock out Grass-weak Pokemon, and you play maybe a Manectric to take out Lightning-weak Pokemon, and an Evil Towel to take out Dark-weak Pokemon, and a Mewtwo to take out Psychic-weak Pokemon. We've seen these decks, and there was a US regional stream last year. In fact, if you go to twitch.tv/Pokemon, you can probably find one of the regional streams, because they do tend to archive them on there, and you can see one of these decks in action. It's an excellent, excellent deck. And what you do is essentially play 1 Pokemon of every type, 4 Rainbow Energy, 4 Prism Energy, and then whatever your opponent puts out, you can hit for weakness, because Aromatisse allows you to move all the Prism and Rainbow Energy, as long as the Prism Energy stays on a basic. As soon as it hits the stage 1, it stops becoming Fairy or all types. Prism Energy, remember, is all types when it's on a basic, colourless when it's not. So if you accidentally put it on an Aromatisse, for instance, it becomes colourless and indeed useless. So you've got 8 energies you can move around, and you put down any type of Pokemon you like, and you can always hit for weakness. Now, in a deck like that, this Xerneas would be very useful. Fairy double colourless. Now, these decks tend to play a bunch of double colourless for cards like Mewtwo and Seismitoad as well. So, you can get this going nice and early. And, these decks will also tend to play... Now, they can play Fairy Garden, because then all of your Pokemon have free retreat. But they tend to play Darkrai, because then it's a dark Pokemon, and it hits the bench with Night Spear, and it gives all your Pokemon free retreat. So if you've got free retreat with Darkrai, you don't need to play Fairy Garden to give free retreat. Remember, Fairy Garden is a stadium that gives free retreat to any Pokemon that has a Fairy energy attached. Darkrai does the same thing with an ability if you've got Dark energy attached. If you've got Rainbow or Prism, you've got both. So you can play whichever stadium you like, and the decks that I've seen like this recently have tended to be playing Skyfield as their stadium du jour. So in theory, you can be hitting a whole bunch of damage for free energy here. But having said that, you're playing all different types of Pokemon, so you can hit anything for weakness. So you don't need to be hitting massive amounts of damage. If you're hitting for weakness, the maximum you need to do is 120. So, do you really need this Xerneas? I'd argue potentially not. Maybe as a one-off in, these expanded Aromatisse toolbox decks, but that really is it. Second attack, 2 fairy, 2 colourless, 80 damage. If you recovered any HP during your turn, it does 160. 160 for 4 energy is fine, but you have to have healed damage, and I'm not a fan. Evil Tal, I am less of a fan. It's got an ability, an interesting ability, Fright Night. As long as this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, all Pokemon tools have no effect. That means you hit through Focus Sash and can one-hit KO. It means that you hit through Hard Charm and it doesn't reduce damage. It means that if, for instance, they've got a Garbodor on the bench, which is turning off abilities, presumably, once Evil Tal became active, and I don't know, we'd need a ruling on this, I believe Evil Tal's ability would mean that tools have no effect, which means that Garbodor doesn't have a tool on, which means he doesn't turn off Evil Tal's ability. I think that's the way round it would go. If there is a judge listening who thinks I'm wrong, please do get in touch with me and I will correct myself. So, yeah. The ability's kind of interesting, but the attack's garbage. Dark and double colourless for 60 to the active, 60 to the bench. It's not absolutely terrible. Maybe garbage is too harsh, but it's not a particularly good attack. And the last new Pokemon that's been revealed, and I say the last, there's actually a few in this particular bit. So let's go through them. There's a Psyduck. It's terrible. There's a Golduck. Now the Golduck stage 1, 100 HP. For 1 water energy, you can do 20 damage and discard a special energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon against something like a Giratina, for instance, that is relying on having a Double Dragon and a DCE in some builds, or at least one or the other in others, usually a Double Dragon, so they can use Reshiram to attach fire energy to make up the double colourless cost. Or against, say, a Seismitoad to get rid of their DCE. It can be useful. It ain't good, but it can be useful in certain decks. The kind of thing that can go in as a tech. But we have, ladies and gentlemen, a Golduck break. And this I like. Now, it doesn't, again, like we saw with Florges, it doesn't have an attack, it just adds an ability. Now, Golduck's attack is nice but underpowered. Let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, that you also add HP with these break Pokemon, and that Golduck can take advantage of the fact that you have, you can use Rough Seas, for instance, to heal him. So he goes from 100 HP to 140. He's still got 1 garbage attack, 70 for free energy, and 1 useful but underpowered attack. But now he gets a really interesting ability. Hypertrans. As often as you like during your turn before you attack, you may move a basic energy from one of your Pokemon to another one of your Pokemon. Its ability gives you infinite energy switch. It's the kind of ability, now we saw a Miss Magius with an ability like this back in the day. People used it with, they used it with the, what am I thinking of? The bull Pokemon. Oh, this is very annoying. I used it when I was doing my CMT list. It's going to come back to me in just a moment, you know what I mean. But it was the one that did extra damage when you'd had a Pokemon knocked out the previous turn. Terrakion! I know I could go back and edit that, but I like PTCG Radio to have an authentic feel. It was used with the Terrakion to do his revenge attack, and it was fine, or retaliation I think it was called. And, that did see a bit of play, but this isn't a stage 1, it's essentially a stage 2. And go back to my discussion when I did the podcast all about Broken Vine Space, Forest of Giant Plants. I talked about this at length then. There are the Pokemon trading card game, the history thereof, is littered with really interesting Stage 2 abilities that no one played because they didn't want to play at Stage 2 just for the ability. It took something like a Blastoise, attach as many energy as you like per turn, to really get use as a Stage 2 just for the ability. And even then, as soon as Tropical Beach was rotated out, that stopped seeing play until Maxis came back in. Hang on a second. To see the transition, I'm doing a transition here. I'm hoping you're enjoying this. You can use Golduck Break with Maxis. Now, I'm assuming Golduck Break acts like regular Golduck. Again, we haven't had a ruling, and as with all of these things, we won't have a ruling until the sets are officially released. That is a bit of a... It's a convention. It's what Pokemon tend to do. But break are break evolutions, so there is a use for Golduck. And that is, in any deck where you can afford to play a Maxis, you can play 1 Golduck, Oh, sorry, Archie's ace in the hole. You can afford to play one Golduck and one Archie's, and now you've got infinite I can move my energy around. This is super, super useful. It's like Aromatisse, but better. Now, I don't like Golduck Break as Golduck Break. I think as a stage 2, it's underwhelming. I love it as a Maxie's target. I really, really do. Or an Archie's target. Maxie's, by the way, remember it's fighting Pokemon. Archie's is exactly the same, but for water Pokemon. Now, I'm assuming you can use this with Maxie's, and I see no reason why you wouldn't be able to. It is like a level X, but I'm sure it can exist on its own. It'd be interesting, because remember Break Pokemon, you kind of add them. They are horizontal cards that you add to existing stage 1s. Now, any basic Pokemon, any basic energy you've got in play, you can move around at will. Now you can use Max Potion. Now you can pile up all of your attackers. Now you are essentially Lysandra proof. I could keep going, but I'm hoping you get the point here. This is a really, really interesting card. I love Golduck Break as an Archie's target. I mean, think how good Aromatisse is. Now imagine you can have it on stage 1. And now imagine it's for all basic energy, not just Fairy. And imagine it's got 140 HP. Now, here's one reason why Golduck Break might not work. It's not a full card. It doesn't have a retreat cost. It doesn't have weakness. It doesn't have resistance. And it actually has 0 attacks. So, I'm really unsure how they're going to rule with this. Honestly, and again, if there are any judges listening that have an idea about this, I need some detailed reasoning, but please do get in touch with me. It is a Pokemon in its own right. It is an evolution, ergo, it seems only fair you should be able to Archies for it. But it's not a full Pokemon card, it's something you add to an existing card, so I think there could well be a ruling that Break Evolutions won't be used with Maxies. And the convention has always been, we don't get a proper ruling until the set is released. Now, let's say for argument's sake, Golduck Break cannot be used with Archie's ace in the hole. Well, it's still vaguely playable. You could Archies for Golduck and then evolve the following turn. But now it's nowhere near as good. Now you can't have it turn 1. Now you need a greater combination of cards. I am still a fan of trying it in some decks because it's a more awkward Aromatisse because you need to get the stage 1. You need to get the Archies and then evolve the next turn, rather than Aromatisse where you need to get the basic, and obviously getting a basic is much easier than playing an Archies with a Golduck in the discard pile. So the ruling, and the more I think about it, the more I am tempted to say it's not going to be a valid Archies target. If it is, I love Golduck Break. If it's not, I see it as the basis for interesting /rogue/unusual decks, but I don't see it being an absolute staple. But it's certainly an interesting card. Aromatisse has been good. The Kling Clang that was a stage 2 that did it for Metal Energy has been good. Golduck Break looks to be good. The question is, are you going to be able to make it work consistently enough to get it going? Probably enough Golduck Break talk, if we're honest. While we're here, though, how are these Break Pokemon going to work? Because if it literally is a case of the only way to get them out, they can't be Maxied, they can't be Archies, they can't, there's no extra mechanic, there's no extra support cards yet to be revealed. It's literally just, you have to take one more turn to evolve a stage 1 or a stage 2. There's been no basic Pokemon that have a break yet. If it's just you have to take one extra turn to evolve your stage 1 or stage 2 again, we're back to Mega Evolutions before they got Spirit Links. With Mega Evolutions before they got Spirit Links, and again, I did go through Mega Evolutions. When Mega Turbo came out, I did a podcast all about Mega Evolutions, and I encourage you to go back to that. And I went through all of these at the time, and my overriding comment again and again was, these Mega Pokemon have got to be amazing to make them worth giving up a turn. You've got to wait a turn to evolve them, and then you've got to end your turn to evolve. They better be bloomin' good, and they weren't. None of them were good enough. And then Spirit Links came out, and then we got stuff like Rayquaza. I suppose Kangaskhan was just good enough in some decks for a bit. I think Break Evolutions are going to be like that. I don't think any of them are really good enough to warrant that. Now, Golduck is good. I like Golduck. Zoroark is good. I like Zoroark. But are we really... Now, Zoroark Break, I think we'll see play purely on the basis that its attack, copy any of your opponent's attacks, or your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks, for 1 Dark Energy is beastly. That is a hell of an attack. But also, you know, you're going to be playing Zoroark, because Zoroark, he's got a decent attack, oh yeah, and he's got Caldeo EX's ability. So you're going to be playing that break just because you've got Zoroark there anyway. I don't think Golduck's good enough to play on his own. So it really is going to be interesting whether they give us any help with break Pokemon, or whether they do what they did with Megas. And I don't know this for a fact, I'm guessing here, but I am absolutely convinced that what happened with Mega Pokemon was that Pokemon went, yeah, this is going to be really fun. Oh, no one's playing it. Fine, we'll give them some help. Hence Spirit Links. Although why they don't give Spirit Links for the promos like Metagross or Diancie or Absol that they give in boxes, I have no idea whatsoever. It would take so little effort to just give you a playset of Spirit Links in those boxes. Or even just one Spirit Link in the box, but they don't seem to want to. There is also a Palkia EX. Now, the second attack for 4 water energy does 120 to the active, 30 to 1 on the bench. It's garbage, move on, nothing to see here. What's interesting is its first attack. It's Virizion, but ironically weak to grass. 2 water energy, 40 damage, okay, not 50, it's slightly weaker. 40 damage, search your deck for 2 water energy and attach them to one of your benched Pokemon. It's like Emerald Slash, but for 10 less damage and for water Pokemon. I'm going to be quick about Palkia, because I think there's not much needs to be said. Virizion Genesect was really, really good when the vast majority of decks could not KO a Virizion before they got an Emerald Slash. That is no longer the case. Night March, Vespiquen, Rayquaza. We have loads of decks at the moment that could theoretically pull off a turn 2 180 damage. And with Virizion, the thing always was, if you can manually attach 2 grass and then use Emerald Slash, then you get going, then you're fine, then your deck is working nicely. But if Virizion got KO'd before the first Emerald Slash, you essentially lost the game. And then when decks like Night March, like Rayquaza, etc. started coming along and being able to KO Virizion before they got an Emerald Slash off, you lost the game. And I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but I think there's a pretty decent chance that's happening again here. Sorry. There's a whole bunch of little Pokemon we don't need to worry about, but there's also it's a card I can't decide if I like or not. It's a new supporter card, Misty's Spirit. Now, you want to give me a new Misty's card? She is my favourite gym leader. Not for that reason. Grow up. I like water Pokemon. I usually play fighting Pokemon in the trading card game. I tend to gravitate towards fighting decks. But I always liked water Pokemon in the games, in the films, in the TV show. I'm from Cornwall, let's face it. And Cornwall, for those that don't know, is, if you look at a map of Britain, it's the bottom left bit. The bit that's completely surrounded by ocean. I'm a water-faring chap. So I've always been a fan of water Pokemon, which made Misty my favourite league leader. My favourite, league leader. So I'm always excited about a new Misty's card. Now, I haven't seen an image for this, but I can only assume it's that Misty. Why they're doing a new Misty card, I don't really know. I'm going to be honest. The first generation gym leaders haven't had their own cards for a while, but they are. Let's not argue with it. Discard 1 card from your hand, then look at the top 8 cards of your deck, choose 1 and put it into your hand. Now, I'm unsure about this. Now, Trainer's Mail, and you can go back. I was wrong about Trainer's Mail. Hold my hand up. I was wrong about Darkrai EX as well. I said that was going to be terrible. I was not a fan of Trainer's Mail when it was first revealed. Now, I rarely play a deck without Trainer's Mail. The ability to look at the top 4 cards of your deck and pick any trainer and put it into your hand just makes it adds so much consistency to your deck. It's absolutely ludicrous. I played a deck at the weekend. I believe it had 3 draw supporters in. 2 Sycamore and an N. That's it, 3 draw supporters. Because between Battle Compressor, VS Seeker, Acrobite, Trainer's Mail and Shaman, and Ultra Ball, and Jirachi, I didn't need any more than 3 draw supporters. It was like playing back in the SP era. It was lovely, ladies and gentlemen. And Misty's is kind of like Trainer's Mail in a way. except it's both better and worse. Now, you do have to discard a card to use it, but a lot of the time that can be a good thing. Playing Vespiquen, you want energy in the discard pile. Playing anything like a Dark deck and Expanded with Dark Patch, or any deck that uses Mega Pokemon and Mega Turbo, or a Bronzong deck that wants Metal Energy in the discard pile, etc., you can look at you can get that in the discard pile. And then being able to look at 8 cards, ladies and gentlemen, that is more than you would for a Juniper. Imagine when you're trying to Juniper you're trying to Juniper to hit 1 card. Well, here you only get 1 card, but you're digging even deeper. The biggest problem with this is, and this is going to sound obvious, for which I apologise, it's a supporter. And one of the things we are most often digging for is a Lysandra. Now, obviously, if you Juniper looking for a Lysandra, you ain't going to play it next turn. But not only that, you're giving it away to your opponent. So if I use a Misty Spirit and I hit the Lysandra, I'm going to have... Oh, no, sorry, no, you're not. I do apologise. I'm getting the ruling wrong here. This is going to be exactly like Computer Search. With Computer Search, you don't have to reveal what you've gotten because, well, it doesn't matter. It's a card. Now, if you're, for instance, if you're using Professor's Letter, you're getting 2 energy. You have to show your opponent you've got an energy, so they know you've got an energy and not cheated. But for Computer Search, you're grabbing any card, so it doesn't matter. It'll be like that with Misties. As long as you take a card, you won't have to show them. So no, that's not a downside. Let me take that one right back. I like Misty Spirit. I don't know how useful it's going to be. Because there's probably going to be a lot of turns where you're going to be using Misty Spirit to get a supporter. But I am a fan of this. Let's say, as a one-off, because you're going to be playing 4 VS Seeker, and if you're making any deck without 4 VS Seeker, it better be Vileplume, or else you're playing the game wrong. I mean, there might be other exceptions, but essentially you play 4 VS Seeker, it's that good. So you put 1 Misties in your deck, and it might be that you're desperate for a double colourless energy. Well, your best bet for hitting a double colourless energy isn't to play a Sycamore, because a Sycamore will give you a DCE if it's in the top 7 cards of your deck. And Misties will give you a DCE if it's in the top 8 cards of your deck. Now, it will only give you a DCE, whereas Sycamore will give you 6 other cards. But the other thing is, how often do you play 2 or 3 Sycamore and then end up discarding stuff you'd kind of rather have? Well, yeah. Not bad. I quite like Misty Spirit. I don't think it's going to be a 4 of in every deck, but I certainly think... there are and if you've been playing this game for any length of time, there are so many turns that you're desperately digging to find a card. The Misties is going to be useful for that. So, as a quick side note, what break Pokemon are going to be in our next set? I haven't got a blooming clue. Now, we know we're going to have 6. And how do we know that? Well, because the set information has been revealed. 6 new Pokemon break. Now... we already know about Florges, Marowak, Chestnut, Zoroark, Raichu, Golduck, Luxray, and Noivern. For those of you who can count and could, keep up with that, that's 8. We're only getting 6. So, now we know we're also not getting Palkia EX, Moral and Mega Moral, Aerodactyl, and Mega Aerodactyl. We're not getting them in our November set. Now, they're coming in decks in which we also get Raichu, Noivern, Luxray, and Golduck break. So does that mean that those 4 break Pokemon, like the EXs that share their little decks, because in Japan they've got these releases, a lot of EXs are only released in these little decks. So, if the EXs aren't coming in the decks, then that would suggest that Raichu, Golduck, Luxray, and Noivern are also going in the deck and not coming in our X and Y set. Okay, that makes perfect sense. But then we need 2 more. Because that only leaves Florges, Marowak, Chestnut, and Zoroark. So, we're going to need something else. So, yeah. I don't really know. It's going to be weird. I suppose we wait and see what's revealed. It's the first time in a while we're really kind of guessing what's going to be in the set. Now, I'm using some of Pokebeat's logic and kind of taking it myself and having a play with it to decide that, like I say, if we're not, the EXs seem like we're not getting the ones from the decks, so it makes sense we don't get the break Pokemon from the decks. So, who are our other 2? Also, it means that the Golduck thing isn't an issue for a while, because we're probably not getting it in our November set. Will it be a promo? I don't know. I want that. I want to be able to Archies for that Golduck. It's going to open up so many avenues. But I don't think we're going to be able to. I don't know. Never mind. We win some, we lose some. So, let me tell you about my league challenge I went to at the weekend. I went down to Sheffield, and it was a weird kind of tournament, because it was a university society running a... I know we have a few of these in the UK. My good friend Beck Amanda, she launched the Lancaster Pokémon Society, and they do Pokémon Societies, in a few universities now. But I've never seen one hold an actual sanctioned tournament. Now, it was free entry with no prizes other than the promo cards, which is not a bad way to do it. It's nice to not have to pay to enter. And it means people are only playing for the promo cards and the points. But it was held in a university. But that means there's lots of plugs around. Now, props to the guys running Sheffield PokeSock, running the tournament. They did let us, they let us record a few games at the tournament, which was really, really lovely of them. And it was an alright little tournament. It was weird being in a university, but it was quite good. It was swarming. I think there was something like 7 or 8 Worlds players there out of 20 Masters. It was absolutely ludicrous because we only had enough people to get points for top 4. Now, for my money, I played an Evil Town deck. I played one Archeops. Archeops has the ability to, stop your opponent evolving, which was completely useless all day, but gosh darn it, the thought was there. I played one Archeops because I just gambled that it wouldn't be prized in any important games. I played 2 Maxis. Maxis is a card like Archie's I've been talking about. You can play it if it's the only card in your hand. Archeops goes on your bench as if it was a basic, and you can draw 5 cards. It means that on a good turn, I didn't get this all that often, but on a good turn 1, you can actually get Archeops out turn 1 going first. And if you play against an Evolution deck, and Bronzong came, let's not ruin the videos I'm going to put up. Bronzong came top 4. And obviously, if you can get a turn 1 Archeops against Bronzong, you're screwing your opponent over royally. So, this theory was there. The reason I played 2 Maxis, a lot of people have gone down to a 1-1 line. Now, if you only play 1 Archeops, you're betting it's not going to be prized, but it's not the end of the world. I'm not a fan of playing 1 Maxis for very obvious reasons, and that's sometimes I want it in the deck, so I can use an Ultra Ball for a Jirachi to get it. Sometimes I want it in a discard pile so I can use a VS Seeker to get it. So I like to, as soon as possible, get 1 in a discard and keep 1 in a deck. So I can maximise my chances of drawing into it, of finding it early. So round 1 I play against a new player. We don't need to go into that. Round 2 I play a lovely lady called Wendy, and she is playing Seismitoad and Giratina. And this was one of those games that I was so happy that Lissandra's trump card was banned. Because I went first, and I had a beastly turn 1. I got double, because I'm playing against Seismitoad, and one of the things I love, as a side note here, about the format at the moment, expanded and standard to a slightly lesser extent, I only played 5 games. It was single game. I didn't have a dead hand all day. Because you can play a consistent deck now. Like I say, I was only playing 2 Sycamore and 1 N, but I was playing 4 Battle Compressor, 4 VS Seeker, 4 Ultra Ball, 2 Shaman, 1 Jirachi, I think 3 Acrobike, 4 Trainer's Mail. I always had something to draw. So it meant that my deck just ran. And it meant, except for one game we'll get to, it meant I was winning or losing based on my deck choice and my playing. And that is how I want to play. And then... So I get free energy on the board, I'm doing really well, I'm feeling good about myself, and on Wendy's turn, she gets a head ringer on both my active Evil Town, she gets a Super Scoop up to heal her Seismitoad, she gets a Laser and a Verbank to poison my active baby Evil Town, and she hits heads on 3 Crushing Hammers. And I lose all my energy. Now, at one point, I hit a Laser turn 1, and Wendy hit Tails on that. And then drew into a switch anyway. No, she didn't. No, sorry. There was one turn I didn't have. Yeah. So it was turn 2 she hit the Super Scoop up. After she hit Tails on the Laser, she proceeded to hit 9 heads in a row. 2 Super Scoop up, 3 Crushing Hammer, 2 Laser that I then hit Tails on. But what I'll say is, as much as it was frustrating in the first couple of turns, Lissandra's trump card is gone. So as the game went on, I'm looking through her discard pile and I'm going, well, she's out of lasers. She's only got 1 Super Scoop up left. She's used all of her Crushing Hammers. She did hit Tails on them before, thankfully. So actually, this isn't the end of the world. There was a frustrating couple of turns where Wendy, she used all of her flip cards, but then she ran out of flip cards. And I eked out a very, very narrow win. It took me kind of drawing through my entire deck on the last turn of the game to get the win. One thing I will say, Giratina ain't good against Evil Town. Seismitoad's not great against Evil Town unless you hit heads on hammers, because you're doing maximum 80 damage per turn, and Evil Town swings for big damage when you've got energy on. For those that have forgotten, Evil Town's attack does 20 damage, plus 20 for each energy attached to each to each active Pokemon. So if they've got a DCE on Seismitoad, that's 60 damage before you even get going. Well, you've got to have a minimum 2 energy. That's 100 damage if you've only got 2 energy on. That adds up very, very quickly, ladies and gentlemen. As for Giratina, well, you don't want to attack with Giratina. Giratina needs 4 energy to attack. That means they are adding 80 damage, which means with just 2 energy, you're doing 140 damage, and you ain't trainer locked. So I've taken down a couple Seismitoads. Giratina fell fairly quickly, and that was the end of the game. A very close game. Had Lissandra's trump card not been banned, there is absolutely no way whatsoever I win that game. Then round 3, I'm playing Ryan Morehouse, and I want to talk a bit about this game, because this was very, very interesting. He was playing Blastoise in what seemed like Jacob Van Wagner's World's winning list. It might have been a little different, but it wasn't very similar. And I've spoken about Ryan Morehouse on the pod before. He is one of the best players in the world. I have no doubt about that. He's placed highly at Worlds 2 years in a row. He's been in Masters 2 years. He is a superb player. He starts Articuno, I start Absol. Now Articuno he's got Delta Plus, so you take an extra prize when you take a KO. He needed, I think he does 20 damage plus 40 more for each heads out of 3 coins. He flips 3 coins, he hits 2 heads. On turn 2, I got an amazing turn 1, he did as well. Both our decks worked nicely. He went second, so he got the first attack. He KO'd my Absol with Articuno and drew 2 prizes. Now, I suppose you can say he got lucky because he hit 2 heads out of 3, but at the end of the day, his deck did what it was supposed to do. But that left me in a superbly awkward position, because in a regular game, I would be going, right, need to get my Absol to KO that Articuno with Laser and Verbank, and he's got to have a few bench Pokemon, and I can get Muscle Bound. I can KO that Articuno with my Absol. Absol does 20 damage plus 20 more for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. But he killed my Absol with Articuno. So I've got, and I can't kill it, well, not without using 2 Dark Patches, I cannot kill it with a baby Evil Tau. So that means I've got to KO Articuno with an Evil Tally X. And I can't not KO the Articuno, because if the Articuno hits heads on grabs a Lysandra and hits a couple of heads, he can take 3 prizes off a bench Shaman. So I have got to take out the Articuno. Despite the fact he's 2 prizes ahead, I've then got to, and Ryan's an awesome player. He's not gonna put down another non-EX Pokemon. So I'm left in this, and I know I have no choice here. I've got to take out the Articuno. I've got to kill it with an EX. I've got to force myself into a 7 prize game, and if he can hit 6 energy, or 5 energy in a Muscle Band, his Caldeo EX can KO my Evil Tal, and I'm screwed. I am proud that I took it down to the final turn and the last prize. I end him, like a good boy, because I could use VS Seeker and Battle Compressor to get the N and play it. Now, there was one turn, I managed to KO both of his Keldeos, and elongate the game just a little bit. That was useful. And then he ended up in a position where I had 2 choices. I could either KO, I had 3 prizes left. I could either KO the Blastoise, and then he'd have to hit a Maxie's, and I don't know if he had an Archie's. I don't know if he had a VS Seeker left to do so, and get a bunch of energy onto his Mewtwo to take the win, or I just KO the Mewtwo. Or I can take out the Mewtwo and hope he doesn't get a Caldeo and 6 energy. Now, I know I've got the KO on the Mewtwo. I take the KO on the Mewtwo. What I could have done was use a Trainer's Mail for an Acrobike, and then I would have needed to use the Acrobike to hit a supporter, and I would have had to hit Escape Rope, DCE, and Verbank in order to get the KO. It was a lot to ask. Now, I went for the play which I knew I could do, KOing the Mewtwo, went down to 1 prize, and Ryan's deck doing what it does, he got the Caldeo and got the win. The other option I could have gone for was risk the Acro Bike, because I literally had a Trainer's Mail and I think 3 Laser and 2 Energy in hand. And maybe I hit what I need off the Acro Bike, but it's... At the end of the day, it was a riskier play, but it had a better chance of succeeding. Because if I KO the Blastoise... Now, I hadn't gone through Ryan's discard pile. Well, I did, but I can't remember what I saw now. Ryan tells me there's no way he could have won if I KO the Blastoise. But there wasn't much chance of that happening. I probably should have gone after the Blastoise, but we live and learn. Round 4, I'm sitting at 2-1. I play an Evil Town mirror match, and this game I'm a little salty about. I played a lovely, lovely chap, but he didn't play the mirror properly. So essentially, now first of all, Battle Compressor. My opponent Battle Compressor turn 1, and he discarded with his Battle Compressor Maxis and Archeops. Well, that's what you do if you play against an Evolution deck, because you need the Maxis in the discard for VS Seeker and the Archeops in the discard for when you play Maxis. In the mirror match, you don't want them in the discard pile. I mean, you do want them in the discard pile. You want them out of your deck. You don't want to draw into them. What you really want in the discard pile is 2 Dark Energy and a Juniper or a Sycamore, so that you can VS Seeker for the Sycamore and you can Dark Patch the energy. Back when Dark decks were all the rage, when everyone was playing them, the absolute perfect start was when your opening hand had an Ultra Ball and 2 Dark Energy, so you could discard the 2 Dark Energy with Ultra Ball. You want Dark Energy in the discard pile until you run out of Dark Patch, because you want to be able to use Dark Patch so you can get a faster start. So that was a little mistake my opponent made, but in terms of the mirror, the way, and if you've played Evil Town mirrors before, I apologise if I'm patronising you. The way Evil Town mirrors work is, it is a Y-Cyclone off. You use Y-Cyclone. The reason you use Y-Cyclone is because you do 90 damage, getting a 2-hit KO, and you move the double colourless to a benched Evil Town, Darkrai, whatever, so that your opponent is only ever facing a 1-energy Evil Town. Because Evil Tail's energy attack is added to by your opponent's Evil Tail's energy. So if you've got 3 energy on there, your opponent's going to KO your Evil Tail quite easily. If you've got 1 energy on there, it's going to be much, much more difficult. My opponent chose to go for a quick Seismitoad. And there is logic to the Seismitoad. The logic is, I'm going to set up while I'm not trainer locked. My opponent isn't going to set up because he is trainer locked. I might get a quick win. Unfortunately, that's not how it happened. What happened is what happens most of the time. I used my Evil Tail to KO a Seismitoad. And yeah, I know that when I KO the Seismitoad, his Evil Tail's going to KO me. It's essentially just going to turn into an who can kill EXs. It's going to turn into a prize war. But if I kill the Seismitoad to start the prize war, I'm in the driver's seat to win the prize war. He knocks out my Evil Tail, I knock out his, he knocks out mine, I win the game. Unfortunately, I whiffed a laser one turn, which was very frustrating. He top decked the Lysandra he needed, his last one because he'd used all 4 VS Seeker, and I lost the game, which I don't mind losing. Losing's fine, but when you know you've played the matchup in the optimum way, it's a little frustrating. I'm sitting at 2-2, I'm drawn against Night March, Evil Tail's weak to lightning. I can beat Night March, I need a really good game. I didn't have one. I lost to Charlie Powell. Charlie Powell's a lovely chap of whom I'm very fond, unless you're not listening, in which case screw you, Charlie. Except you don't know I'm telling you to go screw yourself because you're not listening. He's an absolutely lovely chap. We played the game out. I wasn't expected to win. I didn't win. I finished 2-3 and came 10th. The weird thing is, the Evil Tail player that beat me round 4 made top 4 because he had a favourable matchup in the final round. So whiffing that laser that one turn could have been the difference between going 2-3 and finishing 10th, or going 4-1, getting top 4 and getting points. That's how this game works, ladies and gentlemen. There ain't naught we can do about it. It is inevitable. So, still waiting for my first points of the season. Loved the Evil Tail deck. Loved how consistent it was. The Blastoise matchup really just comes down to who has a better start, and the Articuno meant I was never going to win that game. Don't mind, he played better than me. Night March is, well, Night March is Night March. It happens. The Evil Town Mirror, what can you do? So we're going to finish off today. Actually, there's a brilliant deck that my friend Tamao used. I'm going to tell you about it next week, so we're 45 minutes in today. But listen up next week, and somebody remind me on Twitter next week so I don't forget. My friend Tamao played a genius deck, which I am in love with. I don't think I'll ever play it. It's not my kind of deck, but the decision making, it's outside the box thinking, which is just wonderful. So, yeah, have a look at that, ladies and gentlemen. It is, next week I'm going to tell you all about it. But I want to have a quick chat about the top decks in Standard. We've had a few tournaments in Standard now. I've been to a Standard League Challenge. I've spoken to players at pretty much every Standard League Challenge we've had in the UK. And I have put together what I believe are the top 4 decks in Standard. Now, I suppose I should give you a little warning here, a little appendix. I am not saying that these are the only 4 decks in Standard you can use. I am not saying that your awesome deck, which is a bit more rogue, cannot beat all 4 of these decks. In fact, if you are making a rogue deck at the moment, if you're trying to make something a bit more unusual, think of this as a list of decks you have to beat. If you can beat these 4 decks, you're probably going to have a good tournament. So, what we're basically talking about here is, and again, as with a lot of these things, when I go through this podcast, I like to recklessly speculate, as you well know. But with stuff like this, I am going on results. And from the tournaments I've seen in the UK and Europe and the US, these seem to be the top 4 decks at the moment. They could change, a new deck could emerge. The information I've gotten so far could be unrepresentative of the information as we go forward, and so on and so forth. As it stands at the moment, these are the 4 decks to look out for. Now, these aren't in a particular order, but it just so happens that the first one I genuinely believe is the best one. Manectric. Manectric it's a versatile deck. Now, the beauty of Manectric is several-fold. Let me explain some of the main things about Manectric. The regular Manectric EX attacks for a single energy, doing 20 to the active, 20 to the bench. It means that if you start against a Seismitoad, or a turn 1 Trevenant, or a turn 1 Vileplume, or your deck gets completely locked down, you need 1 Pokemon and 1 energy to start spreading damage around, which will buy you time and set up future KOs when you do get going. We're not talking about a Groudon deck. I mean, one of my wins in Norwich not weekend gone, the weekend before, as I told you about, I played a lovely chap called Scott Simmons, and I got a turn 1 Vileplume and sat there with Miltank till I won, because he couldn't draw anything, because Groudon needs too much to get going. Manectric doesn't. 1 energy, you get going. Secondly, you've got Mega Manectric. Now, there's a few good things about him. Firstly, he's got free retreat, more on that in a minute. But also, his attack does 110, 2-hit KOing basically anything, with a muscle band, 2-hit KOing anything. And it attaches energy from the discard pile to the bench to one of your bench Pokemon. 2, in fact. So what that means is, you can put 2 energy on any of your bench Pokemon, basic from the discard pile, of course. And it means you can play Pokemon like Regice, for instance, that might be too expensive otherwise. And thirdly, you've got Rough Seas, and this is where the free retreat comes in. You're sitting there with Manectric doing 110 every turn. When your Manectric's about to die, you free retreat it into another Manectric, and you just keep going. You could use Max Potion to fully heal it and then just put the energy back on with your new Mega Manectric, but you can sit there behind Rough Seas. Rough Seas heals 30 damage every turn. So if you get 2 or 3 Mega Manectric going, you can just, every time they take a hit or 2, just free retreat and let it heal while you put another one into the active. And it's this combination of all of this which is so good. Remember, it's also got the attack that does 60 damage or 120 if they attach a Pokemon tool, which makes them not want to attach a Pokemon tool, which does 2 things. Number 1, it means, and we've talked about this quite a lot in the last few weeks, you are forcing your opponent to play in a way they don't want to. They can sit there and go, ha ha ha, I have not attached a Pokemon tool, so you're doing 60 damage, not 120. Alright. But you haven't attached a Pokemon tool that you want to attach. So I'm winning that round. And also you can sit there going, oh, you haven't attached a Pokemon tool, have a Headringer. And then you get to Headringer them, which they don't want. And then you're doing 120, not 60. And they're having to pay more for their attack cost. All of this adds up really, really good. You could put any partner with Manectric, but there are two main partners Manectric's going to need. Firstly, it's going to need Articuno. I've just mentioned Articuno in the context of the Blastoise deck with which Ryan beat me at the weekend. It's a little bit overpriced, Articuno. The attack isn't great, but when you're accelerating energy, it works nicely, which is why it works in Blastoise and why it will work in Manectric. Also Regice, a water and a double colourless. You do 70 damage and stop attacks of Pokemon EX to him the following turn. That means that you can just sit there and do 70 a turn. It means that with a Manectric deck, for instance, you can use your first Mega Manectric to set up your Regice, wait till your Manectric gets killed, and then just sit there behind two Regice. They can't Lysandre anything off the bench because, well, they can Lysandre and kill a Regice, but then you've got another Regice ready to go. So it really is pretty awesome. Now, moving into Groudon. Groudon is the same deck it's been for a long time. It's very, very simple. You put 4 energy on a Primal Groudon, you smash. You win. As a side note, if you're playing Primal Groudon, I was talking to Ollie Barnett, a noted UK player recently. I think that's a polite way to put it. And he's explained to me, and he's absolutely correct here. Hard Charm is usually better than Focus Sash. Now, you play Focus Sash to stop one-hit KOs. Your opponent, if they would one-hit KO you with Focus Sash, you discard the Focus Sash and go down to 10 HP. Brilliant. But Hard Charm just takes 20 damage off, which means your opponent needs to hit 260 to get the KO, if they're going to one-hit KO. Who's hitting 260? Even a colourless Rayquaza with a full bench and a Skyfield, i.e. a bench of 8, is only hitting for 240, and they're not going to have a Muscle Band, they're going to have a Spirit Link. So Rayquaza is one of the top decks for which you would need a Focus Sash, and Hard Charm works better. Hard Charm then is just, you know, if you need to waste time against a Regice to build up something to kill the Regice is doing 50 damage per turn, not 70, and so we keep going. Now, you can play Wobbuffet in here to stop abilities, and you usually will, because it means that you can use your trainers against Vileplume, because Wobbuffet shuts off Vileplume. It means your opponent cannot play Shaymin. You're not going to be playing Shaymin, because it's a Pokemon you don't want on the bench to give up easy prizes, because the whole point of Groudon is, you're not taking 6 prizes. So you can use a Wobbuffet in the active to stop your opponent using Shaymin to slow their setup. The other card you want is Regirock, and they are promotional cards. They were in the blister pack, so pick them up. It can recover stadiums, and it's a good non-EX attacker, so, you know, that's what you use. Now, as a side note, before we get to the final two here, I was having what could have been an interesting debate with an idiot on Facebook this week. Don't assume that a match is an auto-win. Everyone's always said, yeah, Groudon beats Manectric. Why? Well, because Manectric's weak to fighting. Well, yeah. It's also a damn sight faster than Groudon. So what do you do instead? Well, Manectric plays Regice. Well, now Manectric always beats Groudon. Well, no, because Groudon plays Regirock. And Regirock can kill Regice. So who wins that matchup? The answer is probably Groudon 55% of the time and Manectric 45%, or the other way round. It depends on the list. It depends on the players. The argument essentially, I ignored it when the person with whom I thought I was having a sensible debate told me, with Giratina, the next deck we're going to get to, with Giratina it's only worth playing if you get the turn 1 Giratina, and like my list, I get it all the time. I get it every time. He said he gets a turn 1 Giratina every time. Well, hang on a second. Giratina needs 4 energy. So the only way that I've found to get a turn 1 Giratina is by using the Reshiram, with the ability that allows you to attach a fire energy to a dragon Pokemon to do the 2 colourless, and double dragon energy to do the 2 others. So in order to get a turn 1 Giratina, you need to get the Giratina, the double dragon energy, you need to get a Reshiram, and you need to get 2 fire energy, and you need 2 Reshiram, and you need 2 switches, or you need 1 switch and a Hydreigon for free retreat, as long as you started with a Reshiram. Because you need to get the Giratina out, attach to Double Dragon Energy, get a Reshiram into the active with a Fire Energy in hand and attach it, switch that Reshiram for a second Reshiram, have a second Fire Energy in hand and attach that, and then get that second Reshiram out of the active to get the Giratina into the active. And you're telling me you can do that consistently on turn 1? Please, let me have your list, sir. Because that sounds amazing. The reality is, ladies and gentlemen, it's not happening. Sometimes you'll get lucky and get it, but you won't all the time, but that's fine. Remember, Giratina is the kind of card which you don't use. It's not a speed card, it's a control card. And that's the key. So please don't be sucked into saying, this deck beats this deck every time, because it doesn't. Heck, at Nationals in 2011, I want to say? Yeah, Nationals 2011, I top-decked Nationals with Donphan having beaten a Gyarados in Swiss, and Gyarados had like a 95-5 match against Donphan. Just so happened I was in the 5% that game and pulled out a win. It annoys me when people sit there and say, this deck beats this other deck all the time. Really? Okay then. Speaking of Giratina, he's got a nice attack which does 100 damage and it stops your opponent playing Special Energy, Stadium or Tools the following turn. No Muscle Band, no Focus Sash, no DCE, no Strong Energy, no Fighting Stadium, no Rough Seas. I could go on, but I think I've made my point. Giratina, there are two main variants that people play. One is with Vileplume. You get the Vileplume out, you get the Giratina out, and then you sit there swinging for 100 every turn, and your opponent can play no items, no stadiums, no special energy. Pokemon, supporters, basic energy. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's all they're allowed to play. Or you can play it with Seismitoad. Partly it gives you a couple of options, but also you get to stand there with Seismitoad blocking trainers until you're ready to start swinging with Giratina. Or you can play the speed list if you can find one that goes off turn 1, using Hydreigon and Reshiram and Fire Energy to get set up. I'm not sold on Giratina. It ain't going to be terribly good against Lugia, because he takes 4 energy. That's 80 damage for Lugia before you get started. It's not going to be very good against Eviltal, if anyone is in fact playing Eviltal. It's, the stuff can go wrong. And of course, if you're playing against a deck that doesn't rely on special energy, what are you going to do then? I'm not a huge fan, although it seems to be winning quite a lot. There was a couple of league challenges in the UK that have been taken down by Vileplume Giratina, so be on the lookout. And finally, we've got Ray. Now, this can be played with Bronzong, or it can be played as a speed list, but it's Ray as we've talked about him many times before. It's the colourless one, and the combination of Delta Evolution and Spirit Link mean you can evolve turn 1. Skyfield allows you to have up to 8 benched Pokemon, so you can hit for 240 damage, and Mega Turbo and DCE mean that you can get all 3 energy on in 1 turn. Now, it lost a bit with the rotation. You don't have Execute anymore, which means you can't fill your bench as easily, because you can't just propagate a couple of Executes and stick them on the bench. It's weak to Lightning, so if you can't get the Altaria going, you will lose to Manectric very, very quickly. You might lose to Groudon if they play Hard Charm. I'm not 100% convinced you will, because you're still faster, but it's something to bear in mind. There are still problems, but it's fast and it can one-hit KO EXs. It's also it is vulnerable to Trainer Lock, I will say that. So, they, ladies and gentlemen, are the top 4 decks. I was having a quick think as I was planning this podcast, whether Eviltal could be making a comeback. And honestly, I think Eviltal would beat Groudon heartily, because, well, you get to do a whole bunch of damage nice and quickly from building up Eviltals. And I think it would beat Giratina quite nicely, because as I've said, Giratina it's got too much energy on it. But it's weak to Lightning, so Manectric would probably smash it. And Ray, he can just one-hit KO EXs too quickly. So I think it would have a positive matchup against Groudon and Giratina, but a negative matchup against Manectric and Ray. And let's not forget, you don't have Dark Patch in Standard at the moment, so something to bear in mind. And as we're about to hit the hour mark, I think that's probably enough for this week. I genuinely, and I've done this a lot, I sat down today and thought, well, hang on a second, we're going to chat about these new cards. I'm going to have a quick chat about the break mechanic and, a bit of a discussion about that. I'll tell them about the tell those lovely people at the tournament we went to on Saturday. Quick chat about 4 top decks. Is that enough to fill? I was like, maybe it'll be an hour, half an hour, 40 minutes. It'll be long enough. People will dig it. It'll be fine. And now it's an hour in. I know too much about this game, and I like talking about it a bit too much. But as revealed a couple of weeks ago, I said, with probably a bit too much hubris, I asked people to tweet me and let me know if it was a bit sad that I was still doing this at the age of 30. And I got a whole bunch of tweets. Thank you to all those people. I got a whole bunch of tweets basically saying, no, man, keep it up. It's good. So I got a really interesting question over Twitter, which I'm going to answer next week. I'm going to tell you about Tamal's secret deck, which it isn't secret. It's been played in public. It's no longer a secret deck. But oh my goodness, is it fun and a brilliant idea. And next week, as long as nothing big happens in the meantime that I need to substitute in, we're going to be talking about Expanded. We're going to start off, and next week we're going to be talking about the full range of supporters available in Expanded. And this is going to be a series we go forward with for the next couple of weeks. All the supporters, particular tech Pokemon, etc, etc. So make sure you check out my YouTube at youtube.com/PTCG Radio. Make sure you check out my video game channel, Wassy Plays. You can find that quite easily by searching or by looking at the featured channels on PTCG Radio. Look out for the games from Sheffield, the Expanded League Challenge, which will be going up in the next couple of days. And other than that, just look after yourselves till next week. Thank you very much for listening. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio. Oh yeah, go rate us on iTunes.